Today's Good Shepherd Sunday. On Good Shepherd Sunday, you can run in a couple directions. One is you can look at what are the characteristics of the Good Shepherd, and I'm going to touch on that, what makes the Good Shepherd a Good Shepherd. And the other thing you can do is what makes us sheep. What are the characteristics of sheep, and why do we fit into that? And I guess the question then is, are we good sheep? And you think about sheep. Sheep are funny creatures. Are they particularly bright? No. So when God calls us the sheep of his pasture, it's not because we're real. Are sheep particularly fast? No, so they don't have that going for them. They can't run away from trouble. Do they have big claws? No. Are they particularly strong? No. Do they have big teeth? What do sheep have going for them? They're cute. That's it. They taste good. Here's the thing now. Is that a good thing if you don't have big claws and you can't run fast and you're not smart? Is it good that you taste good? What does it mean that you're going to spend about 99% of your time doing? Praying. Praying that you don't taste good to whatever's after you. That's a big problem. If you have very little means to protect yourself, but you taste good, you've got trouble. Isn't that interesting about us? That we most often in the scriptures are referred to as the sheep of God's pasture. Really, there's only very, very little that sheep do have going for them. I think two characteristics. One is they have good ears. Sheep have very, very good ears. It was always accustomed to shepherds would gather together, and instead of making every shepherd stay up all night long to protect from coyotes and wolves and that sort of thing, they would put them in a corral, everybody's flock, all mixed up together, and they could have one gate and one shepherd watching that gate. In the morning then, the other shepherds would come from wherever they slept, and they'd come and they could call out to their sheep. Some of them, very often, you would see them playing a little pipe, and they play the same song. And as they would play that song, their sheep would follow them because they hear well. Where you see that too is it's fascinating. If you go out to the Sheeter farm out by where Buddhabaws live, about this time of year they're having the lambs, and very often they'll have twins, sometimes triplets, whole field full of them. Mom's over here, the babies are over here, mom can go, ah! And the babies come running. Now to me, mom sounds just like all the other ones, but they hear so well that the babies can pick mom out of the crowd and run. So they hear well. Second trait that saves sheep is they're good followers. Now that can work against them. If you have one of the particularly slow sheep go up to the edge of a cliff and decide they want to walk right over, the other ones go, oh, that looks like fun. I think I'll join them. And you can end up with a whole flock of sheep going over the side of a cliff. Because they'll follow. That works for them as long as you have a good shepherd. Because they'll follow the good shepherd, and the shepherd will lead them in right paths, which will take them to the place where they're going to find the best food, the best water, all the right things. And I think that's fascinating then that you have in the 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. He leads me in the right paths, right pathways. He's going to take us where we need to go in the right places. That's part of why he's a good shepherd. And we hearing him and following him, that makes us good sheep. Now, as I look at that, he leads us in the right paths. It's fascinating. I never really thought about the 23rd Psalm on this level before, but if you look at it, what does the right pathway entail? Verse 4. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now he just said, I'm taking you through the right paths, and that's going to lead through the valley of shadow of death. Meaning, is it possible that part of the right pathway for the Lord's sheep means we are going to have to walk in places of danger? In places where we might suffer. And in case you missed it in that, let's look at the next verse. You spread a table before me, and all the sheep say, go for it. I like to eat. go for that. Food thing's a good thing. But then, where is the table? It is in the presence of mine enemies. Well, remember you're a sheep, and you taste good. Is being in the presence of your enemies a happy thing? No. But yet it says he's leading us in the right paths. And the right paths lead through the valley of the shadow of death, and the right path leads into the presence of my enemies. There is also the green pastures and the still waters, but still, the point is that the right pathway for the Lord to follow him will take us through trials, tribulations, suffering, even the valley of the shadow of death. I think that's crucial information that we don't like to hear. Now, how does that fit then maybe with the lesson from 1 Peter? Let's look at 1 Peter that I just read to you here too. It says, for this you have been called. Okay, this is why we were called. Here's your purpose. It says, because Christ also suffered for you, he sets an example for you so that you can follow in his steps. Following in his steps means following in the footsteps of suffering. This is why you're a sheep, to follow me. He says, if you would be my disciple, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. That doesn't sound like green pastures. Meaning, suffering is not something to flee from. It is something that is actually integral and crucial to the Christian life. Here's the bad thing, though. And this is amazing. When we go through suffering, and when we go as sheep through things that we don't understand, what do we tend to do then? We tend to turn on the Good Shepherd. You're a lousy shepherd. The green pasture thing, that's cool. The still water thing, hey, I'm with you. The plenty of food thing, I'm down with that. The suffering thing, I don't like you. What's more is we actually turn on the shepherd and his father if we go through times of trial, and we tend to say, you know what, I'm not going to worship you anymore because I don't like your sense of justice. How can you be a just God and let people get sick? How can you be a loving God and let me suffer the way that I'm suffering? You hear what the sheep do to the Good Shepherd? In the midst of it, they turn. They get nasty. We can't bite them too much, but we still get nasty and say hateful things about the shepherd. About as bad as we can get. But what's the real point? When you're really saying, I'm not going to worship a God like that, and he's not loving enough. I am much more loving than that God. I am much more just than that God. What are you really saying? The devil's got a hold of you, I'm warning you. You're saying your standard of justice and your love is far superior to God's standard of justice and his love. Therefore, I'm not going to worship him anymore. I'll worship somebody who has a better standard of justice and love. It just happens to be moi, the sheep. Isn't that incredible what the devil does? Makes you turn against. Now we're supposed to follow the Good Shepherd, and the Good Shepherd, he can go through suffering, and this is fascinating in 1 Peter, and it says why. When he was abused, he didn't return abuse. And when he suffered, he did not threaten. But instead he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. Jesus Christ didn't say to the Father as he's hanging upon the cross, this cross thing stinks. I think I want to be God. Forget about you. He didn't say when they're spitting on him and all that, hey, your sense of justice is rotten. And this, how can you love me if you're going to let me die on this cross? Which is amazing, once again. All these modern theologians running around saying, God can't be a God of love if he let his son die on a cross. This is craziness, people. It's crazy sheep. We are to follow. If you want to get to the green pastures and the still waters, you've got to follow the Good Shepherd.